This is the third video in a series of problem solving and decision making for the School of Business at Washburn University. In this video, we're going to talk about how we define our objectives. So we've gone through stating our problem and determining what problem we need to solve. Now we're going to look at the objectives, and the objectives are those things that we wish to achieve with making our decision. So the objectives are the decision criteria that you will use to make your decision. For example, if you're trying to determine which job offer you should accept, your objectives might be to choose the highest paying job, to choose the job that provides a challenge and the best opportunity for career advancement. And another thing might be that you want a short commute time. You don't want to spend an hour on the road every day to get to and from work. It's important to notice that you can have more than one objective for a problem. And then later on, when we talk about the consequences table and going through the trade-offs between different alternatives, that we can weight and we can use different objectives to figure out what is the best overall solution to our problem. Additionally, objectives help us determine what information we need to seek out in order to make our decision. Objectives help us explain our choice to others. Objectives determine a decision's importance and how much time and effort it deserves. So, for example, you might have a problem you're trying to solve of what to have for dinner versus a problem where you are trying to determine where to work. Obviously, one is a more important choice, where to work, than the other one, what for dinner. And so that will also determine how much time and effort we spend on gathering information and making that decision. Another important aspect of defining our objectives is that the objective should be quantifiable. Now, this is different than how objectives are presented in the Smart Choices book that I mentioned in the first video, because in that book they're focusing on personal decisions. In this case, though, we're thinking about how can we make decisions in a business setting. And it's important that the objectives are quantifiable so it's easy to communicate the rankings of different alternatives that we decide to look at. So an example I like to use here is if you put down an objective as having a high quality, for example, high quality house or place to live or high quality car, how do you define and how do you measure quality? And I'm going to come back to this idea later on, because it has to be an external, there has to be an external way to measure our different objectives so that we can communicate them well. Something else with defining our objectives, we should watch out for pitfalls. Sometimes decision makers take too narrow of a focus. We shouldn't focus only on tangible and short-term results. We should consider the future and other items other than just the very tangible items we see right now. Decision makers often spend too little time and effort on the task of specifying their objectives. So first, don't overlook important objectives. And then secondly, seek out and listen to other stakeholders who will be affected by your decision. Mastering the art of identifying objectives. Step 1, write down all the concerns you hope to address through your decision. So compose a wish list of all of the different goals you hope to achieve. Think about the worst possible outcome for making this decision. Consider the decision's possible impact on others. Ask people who have faced similar situations. And finally, ask important stakeholders what matters most to them. Step 2 is to convert your concerns into succinct objectives. The third step is to separate ends from means to establish your fundamental objectives. So for example, if you're looking for a car and the problem that you're trying to solve is which car to buy, well, you might say that an objective is to have leather seats, but really that's a means to establish an end, which might be to have comfortable and attractive interior for your car. Step 4 is to clarify what you mean by each objective. The example I like to use here is kitchen cabinets. My wife and I a few years ago were looking for new kitchen cabinets. We went to a cabinet store, and most of the cabinets were pretty similar, but the salesperson, showed us cabinets and said these are our lower quality cabinets, and then showed us the high-end, high-quality cabinets. And we looked at these cabinets, and they're actually almost identical. They had the same construction. They used the same materials in their construction. They had the soft close drawers and the soft close doors. All the things that we were looking for that would have made them high quality for us. And so I ended up asking the salesperson, well, what makes, these over here high quality and these over here lower quality? And mind you, the price matched the quality level. So the high quality ones were much more expensive. The lower quality ones were less expensive. And the salesperson told us that it was the finish on the cabinets that determined their level of quality, and that the lower quality cabinets, he said, if you run your hand against them, you can feel the wood grain. But the higher quality cabinets had many more steps in the process of putting the finish on the doors and on the fronts of the cabinets. And if you ran your hand over it, it was very smooth. Well, this wasn't something that really was important to my wife and I, and so we didn't go for the higher end cabinets and pay a lot more money for them. But it's important when someone says something like high quality, figure out a way to measure and quantify what is meant by quality to you, and so that you can communicate that to others. So we should try to make objectives quantifiable. Finally, step 5, test your objectives to see if they capture your or your stakeholders' interest. You should consider alternatives, and we'll discuss this in the next lesson, that align with the objectives and determine if you would be more comfortable with those alternatives. If not, then you should reconsider your objectives. So selecting measures for your objectives. Each objective should have one quantifiable measure. For example, housing. So if we set our objectives with housing were to get a low monthly cost, to get a high quality of neighborhood, to get a high quality of a house, and then a yard, and we might want to say that it's a nice yard or it's a large yard, but these are one of the things that we're looking for in a house. Well, we need to go through and quantify these objectives. So low monthly cost, that could just include the mortgage payment, but it should also probably include things like taxes and the time and expense from commuting to work and school. Some place that's further out, while it may have lower rent or lower mortgage payment, might also severely increase your commuting cost. The quality of the neighborhood. Well, we need to find at least one way to measure that, and it might be crime rates, it might be the smart schools measure for the local school district, it might be the value of the houses in the neighborhood. But we need to figure out a way to quantify that. The quality of the house, again, we need to figure out some things that are important to us about the house to determine its quality. Maybe we want hardwood floors, and that's certainly something we can measure. We can identify whether or not a house has hardwood floors. Maybe we think that large square footage is important for us, so that improves the quality of a house, and we can certainly measure that as well, and we can communicate that out. Then finally, the yard. If we want a big yard, be the square foot of the yard. If we want trees, good trees, we can count those, and we can come up with a measure of the trees in the yard. But again, what's important is our ability to quantify the objectives, and so that we can compare objectives across the different alternatives. And so that ends our discussion on objectives. We're going to work through some examples of objectives in our future modules.